Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. If someone could post in the chat that they can hear me, just to make absolutely sure before I get started. Yeah, great, awesome, thank you. Fantastic. So I'm Cassian Wren. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the head of developer relations for Gatsby. And today I am hosting and running this webinar. So, I really appreciate everyone being here. And today we're going to dig into the Gatsby 5 Slice API. And I'm really excited about this API and what it can do to help with build times. So hopefully you can see the slide and we'll get started. So anyway, let me go over here. Okay, so our agenda today is we're going to go over some vocabulary and some concepts. We do assume that you know what slices are and a basic grasp of them for this kind of webinar, but that's okay if you don't have that background. You can also watch this recording later once you have that background, and there are links in the announcement email for places to catch up. So we're going to create a dynamic slice component map for internationalization purposes today. We're going to take an application that is partially built and we're going to finish it out with slices. We're going to talk about some slice API limitations for power users, and then we're going to answer questions. So first, we're going to go over the vocabulary and the concepts. Like I said, this is kind of a 102 on slices. Like I said, it does assume you have a basic understanding. So when we talk about a slice, what we're talking about is a component that, when updated, is built via Gatsby Node.JS into just the slice for the HTML that's needed, instead of an entire page that this slice is a dependency for. So then we stitch the slice HTML into the header, and that way the existing page doesn't have to get rebuilt just because the slice changed. The slice is the only thing that needs to be stitched in. So when I talk about a slice placeholder, this is the React component capital S slice that we will use to tell Gatsby where the slice is to be stitched in. When I talk about the slice API, this is kind of used to refer to the Gatsby node action create slice and to the functions that do the building and the stitching. So when I talk about the API, I'm talking about everything that happens around slices. And when I talk about a slice component, I'm talking about the React component that we pass to create slice in Gatsby Node.js. All of these will be terms that I will use as I walk through the demonstration code. So you'll hear these a lot. So and the last one is slice alias. This is like a nickname. What it does is, if you want to create multiple slices of a single component, like you want to, in our internationalization instance, you'll want to create a header that's English, Deutsch, and Japanese, German and Japanese. So we want to be able to have that nickname because, as we'll talk a little bit about in limitations, your slice name must be serializable and must be statically analyzable, so that it can't be kind of like the output of a function. It needs to be a direct string. So let's talk about creating a dynamic slice component map for internationalization. What we're going to build is we have a lovely diagram here, and we have the slice placeholder right here. Oh, I forgot, you can't click. Okay, so you got the slice placeholder here in layout.js, and so this is where all the building and this is the slice component is header.js, and you pull that in. And then you've got Gatsby Node.js, which creates header en, header jp, and header de, all based off of header.js, and then creates a page with path and slices with slicer headed lang. And then that way, when you get English home, you get header English. When you get Japanese home, you get Japanese header. And when you get German home, you get a German header. So that's what we're going to be building. If you want to see this in action, this is a working finished product of the demo, working on Gatsby Cloud. So if you're interested in seeing what we're going to build here, then take a look. So what we'll start with is a pre-populated GraphQL API that has translation strings for English, German, and Japanese. We have a layout component with a header component inside of it. And we have a template for homepage and a bio page. What we'll end with is dynamically created pages from Gatsby Node.js for each language using GraphQL data. Dynamically created slices from Gatsby Node for each language using the header component as a slice component. Use slice context and queries. And when you change component header.js, it will only build the slices we created and then stitch them into the pages. This is how we create faster build times with slices, is by being able to, let's say you have a header that's on 500 different pages. Instead of having to rebuild all 500 pages, when you change the header, you just rebuild the header and you stitch it in with HTML stitching. And so that is what decreases build times and increases performance. So this is how we'll get there. We'll create the slice components from the header component, the header slice component in Gatsby Node.js. We'll pass it context, an alias, and a language. And we'll create our pages with a for each loop through each language, pass slice alias for language that the page is rendering in. So header en, header de, header jp. Set our slice placeholder in layout.js. Remember to use header as the ID and let the alias map do its work. I'll talk more about this when we get into the code. And then create the header slice component in source components header.js, and then use the slice query and context to set the language. So this sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, but we'll walk through it step by step because it's live coding time. So I'm going to close out. And you should be able to see my screen still, hopefully. Let me know if you can't, or if anything's too small. We'll make these bigger just because actually I'll close this tile. Okay, how? Close. Not what I meant to do. All right, well, that's fine. Goodness. Okay, and then, no, that's not exactly what I wanted to do. That's what I wanted to do. All right. Pardon me for my status. Great. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna make this bigger, make the terminal bigger, and then make the text bigger. So y'all can see. All right, so let me clear this out. Okay, so yeah, console plus ID, perfect. Okay, great. So you can see what I see. All right, so the first step is we're going to create the slice components in Gatsby Node.js. So when I go to Gatsby Node.js right now, I mentioned that we have the supported languages already in place, and that's true. We have all these translations for title, home, and bio. Now, what we're doing is in this part, the export source nodes, we're adding that to the GraphQL database, and we're going to query that using a slice query. But I left out programming this part for basically for time reasons. So what we're going to do is we're going to create our pages. So we're going to make sure we're outside of export source nodes, which we are. Great. I'm going to close this sidebar here. And we're going to say exports dot create pages. Okay, we go with async. And then we're going to add actions. And I'm going to make that a function. All right. And then supported languages for each. And we'll call that language. All right. And then we're going to say actions that create slice. So this is where we actually create the slices for each of the languages. So for instance, the ID here is going to be an interpolated string of header dash, and then we're going to do a $ open brace, and we're going to say language dot language. All right, so that way it's going to be header en, header de, or header jp, right? So that's exactly what we want. So then we're going to pass it a component. And we're going to do require.resolve. And then we're going to pass it source components header.js. All right, great. So then we do comma, and we're going to say, oh, right, we also want the alias, which is going to be the same as the ID. So I'm actually just going to copy it. Perfect. All right, and then we want a context. Now the context is the context that will be sent into the slice. Now remember, or we'll talk about in, sorry, not remember, we'll talk about in a little bit, we'll talk about the limitation of sending things in context. So for instance, we are sending a string, and that's fine. But if you want to pass a function, you can't do it through props. You have to do it through this context. So we'll talk about that more in the limitations though. So, all right, so we've got our create slice. So we are creating 3 slices because there are 3 supported languages, and they'll have an ID of header en, header de, and header jp. And that's all well and good. Now let's start creating some pages to go with this. So we're going to say actions.create page. Now we're going to add a path. And we're going to say, and then we're going to do that language. All right, so this first one is just going to be the biography, and so, or the homepage, and so the component is going to be require that resolve. Leave it source templates home.js. Great. Oh. Okay, and then we're going to tell slices here. And so this is important. This is the map that allows the dynamic naming. So what we're going to say is when we say header inside of our HTML, what we really mean is header, and then a dash, and then this, and then a language. Language. Okay, so we've got that for the home page. Now what we want to do is we want to copy it. We're going to do /bio. And we're going to change this to bio. And we're going to leave the header alone, because that's what we want. And so now, now we have our pages. We're going to have home and bio for each language, and then we're going to have the create slice for each language. So I'm going to save this, and then we're going to go on to the next step, which is we're going to create our pages with what we already did that, sorry. We're going to set our slice placeholder in layout.js. So, okay, so we're going to go, sorry, I'm programming with a cheat sheet, and I'm pulling up my cheat sheet here just to make sure that everything's okay. So layout.js, and pull out layout.js here. Okay, so right now we've got a header from the header component, and what we want to do is, instead of importing header from header, we're going to import slice from Gatsby. And then we're going to get rid of this header. Now, remember when we set the alias, when we set the map earlier, we said that it would say header in the placeholder, and that's exactly what we're doing here. So slice alias header, and we're going to save that. And then I believe that's everything. Yep. All right. So the next step is to create the header slice component. Okay, so I left this blank. So let's go create our header component. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to import React from React. And we're going to import, and we're going to pull in a couple of things actually using deconstruction. We're going to say link and GraphQL from Gatsby. Okay, so then we're going to start our header. And we're going to make it a function that takes in a slice context and data. And so then we're going to say const title home bio equals data.language. So here we're just deconstructing the data.language from GraphQL into 3 separate variables. Sorry. And then so then we're going to return. We're going to pass parentheses, and we're going to do the header. And we're going to say an H1. And we're going to pass it the title. And then we're going to create a nav with a UL in it, with an LI in it, that also has a link in it to and then we do this, and we do an interpolated string, and then we'll close this bracket so we don't cause a racket. I don't know why I made that really silly joke, but whatever. We'll roll with it. Link to, and we're gonna say slash slice context dot language. Okay, I believe that's great. And then inside the link, we put the home translation. And then let's paste and make this a bio. And then here we're going to add bio. Okay. So now I believe we've done all the steps. So, oh no, we have not finished programming the header because we almost forgot 2 things. We almost export default header, and then we're going to do an export const query, and we're going to call the GraphQL function that was imported with from Gatsby at the top there and on line 2, and we're going to say query. We're going to pass into our query a language string. All right, and we're going to say language. And we're going to pass it language. And then we're going to pass an object. And we're going to say EQ. And then we're going to say language. I'm going to pass a bracket, and then we're going to say ID, language, title, home, and bio. Okay, now I believe we have everything we need to do this. We're going to say npm run develop. And this shouldn't take too long because of the size of the site. But yeah, let's just wait that out real quick. And then what we'll do is we'll go here and we'll open up a new tab while that's building. And we'll say localhost 48,000. So just as soon as it's done, it's taking a little longer than usual because of course it is, I'm live coding. Oh, here we go. Okay, anonymous functions. Now we just got warnings. Okay, so let's go here. Okay, so now we've got the, well, yeah, oh, great. Everything works. Fantastic. Oh, I love it when a good plan comes together. So now you can see through all the different pages. You can do Japanese, my bio, and yeah, so great. So now that we've done some live coding, let's talk about some Slice API limitations. So props and context on Slice placeholders. This first paragraph's kind of copied from the docs, so I'm just going to say that Slice placeholders don't inherit context from their parent components. If you need one, you can wrap root element, or its value can be passed directly to a Slice component, as long as it follows restrictions for what are called other props. Other props must be serializable. That's the short and the long of it. So you can't pass functions, you can't pass objects, you need to pass serializable. Now the alias prop, like I said earlier, it must be statically analyzable. So it's part of the build process. So we need to be able to statically analyze it. If you need dynamic names, you use the Slice alias map like we just did in the internationalization demo when you create the Slice. Now, the last thing is nested slices. Gatsby does not currently support nested slices. So you need to architect your app in such a way that you don't require any nested slices because those are not allowed. Now, here's some useful links. So I'm actually going to leave this up while I ask if there are any questions so that you can write these down. I put them through a link shortener, so except the last one. So hopefully that helps. But yeah, are there any questions? Please ask them in the chat and I will read them out and answer them to the best of my ability. Okay, well, I'm actually going to wait a little longer, just like another 15 seconds or so, just to see if there's any questions. And I'll leave this up, but yeah, great. Timing was exactly the way I wanted it. All right. I'm going to call that here. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining. I really appreciate your time, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your week. Thanks.